Okay, so first, tell us who you are and what the deal is with liability insurance. Why is that so important for coaches?
Okay, happy to. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Bob Weil. I have served as ICF's outside legal counsel for about 11 years uh, on a variety of issues, which is what makes this organization so much fun to work with. Uh, we're here today to talk about insurance for your coaching services for your business and why it's important. And I think the easiest way to address that is if you're operating a business, and whether that's in the United States or anywhere else, um, and your services are of a professional nature, you have clients who, at some point or another, may or may not be pleased with what happened, for lack of a better way to put it. Um, and if where you live is anything like in the United States, we tend to be a little litigious. People like to go to court here. I don't, but people do. So it is important to have an overall risk management plan for your business, whether that's you're a sole proprietor, whether you're incorporated, or whether you're a limited liability company, however you've structured your business. Uh, as part of that business plan, when you went out on your own or you're working for another company, there needs to be some risk management model. And at the pinnacle of that needs to be insurance coverage. The reason being, all it takes is a single lawsuit. It could be the most frivolous thing that's ever come down the road or been seen by the clerk's office in that particular court, but you're going to have to retain legal counsel. And as you may suspect, that's not an inexpensive proposition. Even trying to seek the dismissal of a frivolous claim costs money. It takes your time away from your coaching. It's a drain on finances. And in the end, uh, if you're unsuccessful, it just drags on. So one of the ways that what I've told people over the years is professional liability coverage and other types of coverage I'll talk about here for your business um, is what should allow you to sleep at night. And there's no amount of money you shouldn't be willing to pay to do that because all it takes is one. And I'll give you just a quick example. A few years ago, this was on the employment practices side, which, for example, might be something you'd consider if you've got paid employees in your company. Uh, Employment practices liability claims were a huge deal. There was no such thing as insurance coverage for them before the mid 90s. And then one company jumped in the market and everybody jumped in the market after that. And what I discovered when I was looking into that coverage, and I worked with a few of the carriers that were underwriting it, was that the average cost of defending an employment practices claim, and this was back around 2000, so I'll give you an idea, was about $230,000 then. I submit it is significantly higher now. So that's an example of the way a lawsuit, frivolous or not, can run up fees and cost your business money and you time. So for that reason, I think, and I recommend this to all of my clients, whether they're nonprofits or for-profits, and every one of the nonprofits, you need to establish a relationship with an insurance professional. This is not something you do on your own. You don't, insurance is a very complex area. I'm not an insurance professional. I spent 20 years defending them when they got sued under their professional liability policies, but I'm not an insurance professional. Everything I'm giving you here today is more or less an overview on why it's important. There are any number of reasons why you should sit down with someone who understands what you do for a living as a coach and what's involved, because there are, I did some legwork, and there are 4 or 5 insurance carriers out there that write in this particular market, meaning coaching services, professional coaches. And those policies, what I have found from past experience, are generally not too dissimilar. There may be some inconsistencies. Some may cover something that another one would not. But the only way to identify those carriers and identify your risk is to sit down with somebody, an insurance professional who can do that. And that would be an insurance agent or an insurance broker. If the person you've used for your home or your auto is not a professional liability, not experienced with professional liability, go to another agent. It is not everyone's area of expertise. So that's my first piece of counsel. If you don't have an insurance agent and have never even talked about this type of insurance, you should. And what I will say also is, years ago, I used to teach insurance agents and brokers how not to get sued. It was a grueling 8-hour class, unlike this, which will go very quickly. And at the end, the message, my primary message was always the same. You need to stay in touch with your client, and you need to remind them that they need to stay in touch with you. You should meet with your insurance professional, whether it's about this kind of coverage or any other coverage for your business, every year, every single year, whether it's by phone or video conference or in person, not by email, except nothing in writing. You want to talk to these people. You want to look them in the eye or hear their voice and say, yes, this has changed. This is something I'm doing now I wasn't doing before. I've expanded my services. I've got new programs in my company with respect to coaching. Are these covered under my current policy? Or for that matter, do I have insurance? And if not, why not? Because I'm counting on you as my insurance agent to guide me. So that's really at the heart of the matter, is that if you don't have insurance, you need to think about this in terms of what you're willing to risk. That's what it comes down to, is how much risk are you willing to assume in what you do for a living? You have client relationships. You have confidentiality obligations. You have a code of ethics that you're obliged to adhere to as a professional coach. These are all duties that you engage in that could theoretically result in liability, professional liability. And the only policy out there that's going to defend you for that type of claim, which would usually sound in negligence or a breach of your contract with the client, is a professional liability insurance policy. Also, they also refer to them as errors and omissions policies. So it could be either one. But those are the terms you want to use when you talk to your insurance agent and say, do I have professional liability or errors and omissions coverage? I suspect you'd know, but if you don't, why not? Ask the agent, what's available? Because your property coverage for your business, if you have business equipment or you've got an office that you have to insure, your commercial liability, which is outside of the scope of your professional services. For example, you're driving somewhere to do a presentation in your car and you hit someone, that policy or that claim is going to come under your commercial liability policy, which would also include your business auto insurance. I don't want to run too far off the track here, but for example, that coverage, commercial liability, insures against bodily injury or property damage. A professional liability policy does not. It insures against, it insures your professional services. it insures against your negligence in rendering your services or wrongful, breach of contract. So keep in mind that while you may have commercial general liability coverage, that's not going to protect you if there is a professional liability claim. They are two distinct types of coverage, and they don't overlap. So please keep that in mind. If you have talked to your agent about commercial liability or property damage, property coverage for your equipment or office, that's great. You should have that. But you also should have, if you're looking at reducing your risk and managing it better, a professional liability claim or a professional liability policy. So that's the why you should consider it. It is, again, it comes down to two words: risk management, and well, three words: avoiding sleepless nights. That would be another one. So I think from my research, I know that I obtained through ICF a copy of the form policy for one particular underwriting company, which is Beasley, but there are 4 or 5 more that I identified. When you go, if you go, and I hope you do, to your insurance professional or to an insurance professional and ask about this, see which companies they can write with, meaning they're agents for certain companies, and they can write with those companies. If they're not agents, approved agents, then they would have to go to someone else to broker that policy. So that's most of the why. There are some other components here that we can talk about. The coverage itself is really directed to you and your employees. If you've got employees, your professional line, and let's say you've got 4 or 5 coaches who are members of your staff. If they're rendering professional services on behalf of your company, they're covered under this policy as well. This would all be disclosed when you take out the policy. You'd fill out an application, and it would indicate, okay, how many coaches do you employ? And each one of them would be listed. And obviously, the more employees you have who are coaching and the more exposure the insurance company would have, the higher the premium. So keep in mind that will have an impact, but clearly and accurately convey everything you can think of about your business to the insurance agent. Because what happened early in my career was that it became quite obvious to me that the average person, including me, well, not me anymore, but doesn't read their insurance policy. Probably can't even find it in the house or in their files. And what you have to realize is that an insurance policy is a contract between you or your business and the insurance company that's insuring you. And like any other contract, you're supposed to read it. And if you have questions, it's the agent that you can go to get the answers, because they're authorized by that company. So keep in mind that you do not want to just throw it in a drawer. There are decisions I'm practicing here in Virginia, where judges have thrown out a claim by an insured against their insurance agent because they weren't covered for something, which was clearly explained in the policy, but they didn't read it. So you are obligated to read that policy. So keep that in mind. It's a piece of advice that I give to everyone when I talk about insurance, because you don't know what you don't have until you look at it. So as far as the specifics of different types of professional liability policies, you want to consider what your limits might be. What is your appetite for insurance premiums? If your business is just getting started, you may not want the Cadillac of limits. You may not want $3 million or $5 million in coverage limits. You might want to keep it at $1 million, or even $500,000 if it's available. But the amount that you select will have an impact on your premium. I typically tell people now, anytime they're doing professional liability or any other type of coverage that's based on services, don't do less than $1 million. It's the old adage used to be no less than $500,000. Well, now I go $1 million. And if you can afford more, I'm all for overinsurance. Simply because there are other components to the policy that will impact how much coverage you actually have, which is these policies, professional liability policies, come in two forms. They're claims made and there are occurrence policies. The claims made policy, the carrier is insuring you for any claim made against you during the policy period. So if your policy period is January 1 of this year to January 1 of 2022, any claim made against you in that 1 year period is covered unless it's specifically excluded by some provision in the policy. And the coverage typically runs not just to a judgment against you, damages. It also covers claims related matters, meaning legal fees, court costs. So, and one of the trickier parts of that, and again, this is a question you can ask the insurance agent, and this will just demonstrate how prepared you really are. I can tell you that right now, is that most policies, when they're written, do not include the defense costs, the claims related expenses in the limit. And by that, I mean, let's use it as an example. You have $1 million in liability coverage, and you think that's great. You know, no one's ever going to recover that much against me. Then you find yourself embroiled in a lengthy lawsuit in which your legal fees and court costs, as this drags on, approach $300,000 or $400,000, which is certainly possible. What that means is, in the typical policy, you've got $600,000 left to pay a judgment. In other words, if a verdict goes against you or you're going to settle it, you've got $600,000, not $1 million. So the question to ask your insurance agent is, are my legal costs, my defense costs, included in the limit, or are they apart from the limit? Are they outside the limit? If they're outside, which is far preferable, you have $1 million to be applied against that judgment. The defense costs are totally separate, and the carrier pays those. And sort of the last component of this is what they refer to as a retention. I prefer just to call it a deductible. That's the way most people understand it. They can range on a policy like this. An example would be mine. I have a professional liability policy. I have a $10,000 deductible. That means that the first $10,000 that are spent by me on a piece of litigation, on a claim, come out of my pocket. Once I've exhausted that, it's all on the insurance carrier. The higher your deductible, the lower your premium. So if you went with a $2,500 deductible, your premium is going to be higher because you're only on the hook for the first $2,500. So, you know, that's another thing to discuss when you sit down with the agent. Your limits, defense costs inside or outside the policy. What's my retention or deductible? How, you know, you can piece all these things together to help control the cost of the policy. I wish I could ask if there were any questions, because I'm sure there would be some, but we won't even go there. Also, with respect to professional liability claims, there's no coverage for bodily injury. All right. They insure for emotional distress that's related to your service, that's caused related to your services, but not for actual bodily injury, and certainly not for property damage, which is why you need to carry that other insurance coverage, commercial general liability and the business owners, if you want to call it that, business owners policy. Those are the other two to keep. Know also that if you are the subject of a claim and you are covered, the insurance company will likely appoint defense counsel for you. Don't fight it, because more often than not, they choose from panel counsel, like when I was doing this, and that's all that attorney does, is work on claims related to coaching professionals. I learned more about insurance representing insurance agents than any human being should ever have to learn. So don't fight that. That's their responsibility. And another important point that I wanted to share with you is that if you have a claim, don't report it promptly to your insurance agent. In other words, if someone sends you a letter, one of your clients sends you a letter saying that, alleging that they've suffered damages or some manner of emotional distress, send that letter, that demand letter. It's usually from an attorney typically, but even if it's not from an attorney, send it to your agent and send it promptly. Don't sit on it hoping it will go away if you ignore it, because what happens is the clock starts running and the insurance company can do a lot to protect you while that clock is running, meaning before they start the lawsuit. I would typically be asked, once the letter came in, I'd go to the client's office. I would look at all the records and I'd be ready to go. So the day the complaint was actually served and I got a copy, I could go right out and file an answer or whatever motion needed to be filed. So keep that as part of the line of communication between yourself and your insurance professional. The other type of policy I mentioned was an occurrence policy, which is pretty unusual in the professional liability realm, so I won't go into that in any detail. But you want to also, when you are talking to the insurance agent about this coverage, look to see, and this is really important, what they tell you what's covered in about 3 lines. They say, okay, you're covered for professional services rendered by the named insureds, meaning you or your company or your employees. Well, that's great. What you want to find out is what you're not covered for. And that's where people trip up. You need to go to see what's excluded. And if you have a question about what's excluded, you go to the insurance agent and you say, what does this mean? Okay, because I've had to do it. I mean, I don't know what some of this exclusionary language is supposed to say. It's written by people who are very good about being obtuse. And so you want to make sure you understand it, even if they don't. What I wanted to include in that was the typical policy for a coach, I believe, based on the form that I was looking at, indicates that let me find that language here. It's really quite interesting. They don't cover criminal acts, intentional or reckless and wanton misconduct. They don't cover fraud or dishonesty. They don't cover, again, malicious acts, errors, or omissions committed with criminal, dishonest, fraudulent, or malicious purpose or intent. Okay, well, that kind of tells you everything you need to know. But it also doesn't cover claims where, and this one caught me by surprise, where the coach is providing professional services to a professional athlete. So if you've got professional athletes on your client list, check to see if that's covered under your policy. just a thought, because they make a lot of money and they can suffer big damages. So again, look at the exclusionary language, talk it over with your insurance professional. That's what they're there for. That's how they get paid. They get paid by commission. And so, it's best that they serve you to keep you coming back, but make sure that's done every single year. Let's trying to think of the next question. Oh, yes, it's about I don't live in the US. Do I still need to consider insurance for my coaching practice? Well, unless you don't have a court system in your country and don't have lawsuits, I would suggest that the answer to that is yes, unless you are just completely at home with risk. You may never be sued. Most professionals aren't ever sued, but that's not the point. As things become more complex with the internet and various ways to communicate these days, and new exposures being created all the time in your field, where you are interacting with individuals or companies who are coming to you for your valued professional counsel, advice, leadership. It's important to know that, keep in mind, things can go wrong. And that's what the insurance is about. So again, the quick answer to that one is yes, you should, no matter where you live. If you don't have coverage available there, if someone tells you you don't have it, I'd go ask someone else. Don't accept the answer you get from the first insurance agent you get if it's not what you expected. Shop, look around, because that agent may not be aware of another insurance company that writes coverage in the place where you live. Some carriers write all over the world, some don't. So if you want to essentially follow the same model that I would recommend if you were in this country, you would look at insurance as part of your risk management program. The next question was, what kind of insurance is right for me? Well, I would say if you're a business owner, if you have a business entity that you formed, which you should, to protect yourself from personal liability, that's the purpose of a limited liability company or a corporation. It's to protect your personal assets from being subject to a judgment. If you're a sole proprietor without any structure, arguably your individual assets are exposed. So keep that in mind as also part of your business model. Am I set up the right way to protect myself and my family and my practice? And if you find that you are set up as a limited liability corporate company or corporation, you're going to want to look at, as I said earlier, commercial general liability and property coverage, because presumably maybe you have a great investment in office equipment and computers, printers, scanners, whatever else. You may have office furniture. All of that would be covered under what they typically call a business owner's policy. That incorporates both general liability and property coverage. And that general liability coverage would protect you in the event someone comes to your office and slips and falls. Or like I said, you're driving somewhere on your business and you have an auto accident. That's where that kind of general liability coverage comes into place. If you have staff, you have employees, more than a certain amount required in any given state. For example, in Virginia, it's if you have more than two. If you have two or more employees, you're required to have what we call workers' compensation. That again would be something else you'd want to explore. If you have an active practice online, you've got client data information stored. If you're engaged in and you operate a blog or anything else related to your profession, you want to look at cyber liability insurance coverage. That's the new kid on the block. And it's the one everyone's running out and buying these days because it protects you in the event you were hacked and some outside party has unauthorized access to your data, which might include personal information stored by you that is of your clients. And so there are under certain statutes in the United States, when that happens, you are obligated to act promptly to notify the people whose data may have been exposed. And this sort of policy provides you with the services and cost coverage that's related to all those notification requirements. And maybe maybe your computer's been hijacked, which is becoming the hobby of the day for some folks. You want to be sure you can get back online. And the insurance company that underwrites that particular coverage, and again, it's called cyber liability or cybersecurity coverage, has the experience and the experts that can help you with that. That is another coverage you can consider and talk to your agent about. And then finally, there would be the professional liability, which is what we came to talk about today. That is a piece that I cannot recommend strongly enough. If you have clients and you perform professional services, without it, you're taking a risk that you probably shouldn't be taking. And there are ways to address it that you can work to fit within the budget or appetite for insurance that you have. You just need to sit down with your professional on that.
So Bob, you mentioned if you don't have an agent, or if your current homeowner policy or auto policy don't cover liability, if that's just not something that they're able to do, what kinds of tips would you have for our coaches to find an insurance broker who maybe provides this professional liability?
Yeah, if you were to Google, well, first of all, in the United States, there are two primary insurance professional societies. One is the Independent Insurance Agents of America, the IIAA. Well, now I think it's now IIAAB because they include brokers in there now. And then there's the National Association of Professional Insurance Agents. They're both here in Virginia, their headquarters, but they all have state organizations, affiliates. So in your state, you could reach out to, you could Google to see if the IIAAB has a state affiliate, and reach out to them, because those organizations are comprised, their members are insurance agents and brokers. And like ICF is coaches, that's where they go. That's where insurance agents and brokers go. And that would be one way to reach out to either IIAA, IIAAB, or PIA, the affiliate in your state. Or you could call the national office. They're both in Alexandria, Virginia. The other way would simply, literally, I did this myself. You could Google professional liability insurance agent, and whoever's doing it will come up in your area. That's how I found the other insurance companies that write in this field. I just Googled insurance companies underwriting professional coaching services. And I want to say I came up with, there's Beasley, the Hartford, CNA, one called Hiscox, and Liberty International. So there's a number of them that underwrite this. And you could even reach out to them directly. Again, Google it, and those names will come up. And I guarantee you, if you go to the Hiscox, for example, website, there's a way to reach out to them for a quote and to talk about the coverage with them if you don't have it. So it's all readily accessible to you. Again, whether you want to go through the national agencies that I recommended that insurance agents belong to, or just doing it directly online. But it's out there and easy enough to find out. Even your insurance agent, if they don't write that type of coverage, they may be able to recommend you to someone who does, because they'll know someone. So those are the ways I think you can identify who you might want to talk to, whether it's an agent or the carrier directly. Then the last question I had was, does ICF require insurance for membership or credential holders? To my knowledge, it does not. it's, that's going to be obviously a personal choice. There are other professionals and other professions that will have a sign on their door that says, I don't have insurance coverage, which is when I turn around and go the other way, but, particularly the dentist. But I think it is not a requirement, but it is part of a prudent, well thought out business plan to protect you and your assets and your business. And it's a critical component, and I believe probably the most critical component of a good risk management policy for your business. So I hope I've answered all of the questions sufficiently. If not, you can reach out directly to ICF and they can send questions on to me. I'll be happy to answer any way I can. Again, it is critical that you talk to an insurance professional, not a lawyer like me. You want to go talk to somebody that plays in that sandbox every day. So, thank you, and I hope it was helpful.
Yes, thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate everything, and we'll consider this complete unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
No, that's it. I'm good.
All right. Thank you.
All right.